Hello and welcome to Design Education Talks podcast, the UR School. Our guest today is Dominique. Welcome, Christian.
Absolutely. Thanks for the invite and
Absolutely.
really happy what you're doing at the New Art School. Would love to talk about education, AI, art, creativity, play, all those fun stuff today.
Oh, it's amazing. So yeah, great. Tell us about you and your work. Absolutely.
So again, Christian Dominique, I'm a co-founder of Awe Digital Wellness. That is Awe as in the Awe moment, and also awareness, wellness, and enjoyment, which include play. And AWE has been creating some human and non-human tools to help people with well-being, with happiness, and with more intention and less distraction. So that's the design part. We're trying to design better lives.
Absolutely. Sounds exciting. What do you mean by non-human tools?
We do have our AI called Lumi, and we're building more AI specific to different situation, including one that's coming for education. So spoiler alert, in the summer, we'll have something more geared to education. Right now, it's more about habits and well-being. And we're having in March, I think it's the first time that we're announcing that we're launching in March a new AI called Medi, and it is both for medical and for meditation. So Medi will help people that are novice at kind of breath work, meditation, mindfulness, visualization, and finding all moments with guided audio. So the AI will help them, get better habits and guide them through being guided through the audio recordings.
Absolutely. Okay. So you seem to be working at the intersection of neuroscience, philosophy, and education. Absolutely. How did that come about? What happened that you decided to work in these areas?
So the education part was always in the back of my mind. Very young, I knew that education was the key to real change in society, right? Not just your education, as in I'm learning and I'm becoming a better human being, but the education system and trying to help population learn and collaborate was always something that I knew was important. I always thought of myself as becoming a teacher, educator later in life. And then neuroscience came from, my bachelor degree at McGill, physiology and neuroscience. So always had interest in the brain and, what we know about the brain that in the last 20 and 30 years is incredible, with the fMRI studies now and the brain mapping, which was not, the case when I started. And using now neuroscience and psychology, so understanding that mental construct have a physical place in a network that we can be more understood now is very interesting. And then philosophy has been always, understanding the world more than just in the scientific way, but like concepts that I've been taught about. And like that's one of the beautiful things about being human is that we can think and write and have those discussion like we're having now, and to see which one are relevant. So to me, philosophy is not just things in the air. It's like, okay, which philosophy is actually practical, right? And that's when the design comes in, right? So how can we design our life, our workplace, our schools, our art studios to have more creativity, more productivity, more well-being and happiness?
Absolutely.
And how can we educate people to do that? Because as we'll probably talk later in the podcast, I think that education system are very flawed. They're outdated.
Absolutely.
That could also be the case for work system. But, I had a discussion with some educators last week that why the Silicon Valley in the 90s and a couple of years back started to say, well, workplace should be a little bit different, right? We're talking about strategic HR and helping people have, foosball and coffee and couches in the work environment in the tech companies that started that. And schools almost everywhere in the world are still, there's a teacher in front and there's students facing the teacher and there's no interaction. And that's pretty boring and outdated, don't you think?
Absolutely. Of course, my work.
Yes.
Absolutely. So what's at the heart of all this? What is driving your work? Absolutely.
So do believe that we have the knowledge and the tools to help people be happier, right? So that's subjective well-being, but also we can measure it, right? So in the scientific aspect, we can measure subjective, but also health, wellness. Um, People that have good relationship and real connections, we know they live longer, they're healthier. We know, for instance, that awe, the name of the company, but also the emotion that also has a neuroscience basis. Awe helps the immunity, right? So if you have more awe in your life, in your week, in your day, you're healthier mentally and physically, right? So we want to really, the mission is to bring that to the world, and then to see what are the blockers in education, in schools, in work, in life, and how can we remove slowly those blockers to let the joy that exists already inherent in being alive, that true education system, we forget how to smile, how to laugh, how to have joy, and how to play. And we'll talk also about play. But interesting fact, and I'm also writing books about happiness and those things. And our AI also has some of those concepts integrated in that. So it's more than just Chat GPT. It's also ethical AI and safe. But a very small and easy statistic to remember for your audience, Lefteris, is: do you know that adults laugh and smile more than 10 times less than children? Right? So why is that? Well, we get domesticated. We get told by education that we're not supposed to laugh, that we have to be serious, right? I love laughing, don't you? Like, let's laugh. Let's have fun. Let's play, right? And we're told as adults that we can't. And then, we want to be mature and wise, and like it's no more playtime anymore. Or I work hard and play hard. But why can't you play while you work? Why not?
Absolutely. You mentioned the word measuring. How do you measure in your practice?
So we do have, we talked about human and non-human tool, right? So we do have, for instance, on our website, awedigitalwellness.com, you have 6 different tests that you can do, right? And so that's a measure. And then you can measure that over time, right? So are you feeling those things today, or feeling that over time? How is it improving or worsening? How can we track that? Do you want to have a coach or a therapist or clinician to review that with you? So there's a human portion, and there's also a measurement portion. And then there's also the AI that can also measure and have, of course, ethical data and help you based on your need, and direct you again to a human if needed. So it's not just the tech alone. It's the tech always human-centric, and a whole community that we're building to have peer support and professional support as well.
That's great. So to get into education, how does your work, how's your work going to help education and contribute to improving education?
Definitely. We are mainly focused on youth. Yesterday, I had a call with, British Columbia in Canada. There's organization that help youth. So we're talking about children, teenagers, and young adults up to 25. That's kind of our focus, because when we talk about education, again, that's the key for the next generation. We're getting old. We're dinosaurs. We got to live the place for the younger ones. And so the education comes in helping school systems, right? So schools, districts, and even, government, provinces, states. In Europe, you can tell me a little bit about education in Spain and in UK. But I'm more familiar with the education in North America, and it is quite lacking in terms of what they're doing at the university level. What, even at the graduate school of education, it's still lacking, right? So that's how bad it is. And so we're helping them with those tools, with those conversations, with the design. And we have, some ability to have a year of contracts with some of those organizations, or more punctual 1, 2, 3, 4 workshops for the organization or for their constituent. For instance, working with universities to have a series of 5 workshops, virtual workshops, to help some people on some topics, right? So one of the things that we're specialized in, beyond the general mental wellness, neuroscience, and happiness, is also talking about what effect AI and social media and technology use is having on well-being. So wellness, well-being, and also on relationships, right? So we're having a pretty amazing discussion here between Europe and North America. That's great. But most people are not having those great conversations. They are either looking at the screen, they are scrolling, they are not taking the time to have deep conversations, and that's affecting the social fabric in education and learning. So we are looking at increasing awareness of tech and life balance, tech use, um, positive and negative aspects. So, for instance, concretely, last week I was with parents and kids from age 4 to 12, and the week before I was with teenagers, talking about the subjects of what is the place of tech in their lives, how we can construe a world that would be ideal with that, and looking at the reality right now, which is I'm waking up and I'm looking at my phone, and before I'm going to sleep, I'm looking at my phone and hearing 5-year-old proud that they were on their phone till midnight, and hearing teenagers that are looking at Instagram at 3 a.m. and that are not primed to learn in the school day. Right.
Okay. So how do you define awareness in your work?
So, awareness is part of our ethos, is part of also my framework of happiness. So my second book, The Four Aces, Awakening to Happiness, the first ace or the first A is awareness. And then we can talk about acceptance, appreciation, and awe. But awareness is the key to everything, right? So how can we raise awareness? And that's part also of education. One of the ways that we've designed to help people raise awareness is actually our digital reset. So you can check on our website. We also have a Patreon, our resets. So that concept is, from 8 minutes to 35 minutes. Can you take a pause in your day and really work on that awareness, right? Are you aware of your thoughts, right? So in the neuroscience aspect, we can talk about metacognition. And so that's awareness of your thoughts, knowing that you're thinking, right? So that's one level of awareness where you know that your thoughts are not you. And then you can also start to know about your emotions. Do I have a desire or an aversion towards something? I really don't want to do this. I'm procrastinating. Okay, why? And that when you start to have the awareness, then you can start to work on ways to find that courage, find that creative. Oh, I have a homework to do, but I'm not creative. Okay, why? How? And once you start to have that awareness, then you can start to challenge yourself. And challenge is one of the other frameworks I have, the 13 C's. And challenge is, you don't want to be always in the comfort zone and conforming, right? One of the challenges of education is that it leaves you pretty comfortable in the known. It doesn't go in the unknown. And it asks you to conform, not to create and be different, right? Then you get bad grades and you fail, right? And it's okay to create and fail or do something that is not useful. There is no failures or win philosophically. If we go back to philosophy, everything is just being and doing. We label it failure or success, but in actuality, it's just existence, right? And
so how can we convince upper management or people in the more decision-making areas to play with awareness?
That's a very difficult question. I don't think there is one answer. If you in the audience also have some suggestion, we're always open. We're not here exactly what we talked about. I'm not here as an authority to tell you what to think or do. I'm here more as a facilitator and as someone who has
stakeholders. To convince the stakeholders, we need for our work to go further. How can we convince the people that are making the decisions?
Well,
use more awareness.
So in terms of either school heads of schools, heads of governments, heads of corporations, or heads of HR, to convince them, you have to talk their language, right? So If I'm talking, which I am, I had a call earlier with the HR director, right? So you have to explain that happy employees are more productive. Actually, their stats, up to 23% more productivity for engaged and happy employees, right? So that's convincing argument, right? Unfortunately your raison d'être, the goal of every business, the bottom line is making money, right? So we want productive employees. The goal of education system is maybe less clear. It states that it wants to educate, but we all actually know that it also wants to create the workforce and wants to have accolades and prestige. And so there's also fame and money involved in school system. And I think you know about that as well, right?
So, what does adult play look like in your framework?
And very interesting. Just to come back to the other question, we talked about productivity, and the convincing element also is less negative, right? So we can imagine that awareness and happiness will also decrease the number of absenteeism, decrease the turnover rate for organizations, and for schools, it will decrease the number of students that fail or drop out, right? And happier, more aware, and motivated students is good, and that's a convincing element. And bring me with any decision maker, we can have a good chat about that. And to come back to your other question, we'll play, we'll laugh about it. We'll say, why is Eva dropping out of her class, and why is she not motivated to study this? Maybe because it's boring. Maybe it's not just the teacher's fault. Maybe it's not Eva's fault. Maybe it's the design of the whole school and curriculum that's making Eva and Ivan and Joshua quit the program, right? And let's play about it. Let's role play. Why? Like, okay, I'll be Eva, you will be the teacher, and here's the principle. Let's do a role playing, right? That's what play looks like, right? So play is not only fun, it is fun and it should be fun, but it's also learning. And play allows you to think differently, right? Play is there to put you in a different situation. We're like, okay, I'm seeing the world in a different way. I'm role playing Eva, so I'm thinking about what Eva would be. I'm going and playing in the yard, right? And play is not just there's the Olympics going on now. Play is not just sports, although that's fun. I love the Olympics. I play some sports myself at pretty high level even. But that's what people think. Okay, adults should only play in a regulated and soccer field or football in Europe, or American football, or the Super Bowl was there, right? Or baseball, or all those sports, which is very regulated. But we want to talk about unstructured play, right? And playing not to win or lose, playing for the sake of playing. And that's when you will start to get more learning and more happiness as well as adult, right? So imagine, I'll give you a simple story, right? I was in Uganda a couple of years back, trekking along and finding the gorillas. So we found a family of gorillas. And we're told, don't touch the gorillas, don't go too close, all these things, right? So we were quite close, a few meters. And there's big gorilla, bigger than me, and females. And then there's smaller gorilla children, right? Maybe brothers and sisters. It's kind of, maybe there's two families. And then the two kids are play fighting, right? The two children gorillas play fighting. And then they come and one of them touched my leg. And I'm like, oh, well, I was told not to go towards them, but they came and kind of played with me, right? And I realized, and the importance of play, right? Why are they play fighting? Because they're learning. And right. And, men and women, boys and girls play a little bit differently as humans and as gorillas. And we're learning, right? So as adults, I'm not saying play fight with your boss, but I'm saying maybe with words, right? Maybe with your colleagues, make jokes. Like I'm notorious to make so many jokes in my meetings. I think some of our employees will eventually call HR and saying like, this guy is making too many crazy jokes. But this is the work culture that we've built, and saying we're allowed to play, we're allowed to make outrageous claim, and people can figure out that it's sarcasm and we're not serious and we're pushing the boundaries and we're thinking differently because we're doing that. And that's what it looks like in an organization.
This
And
is great, but I feel that organizations are getting more authoritarian
Mhm.
and more prescriptive and more top down.
yes,
So how do you bring this approach into the organizations?
Feeling lost in the noise of social media? Inspo cuts through the clutter, connecting you directly with real insights from real experts and industry leaders. It's a new social network dedicated to knowledge sharing, industry insights, and thought leadership. Get the latest from top minds in your field, or build your own thought leadership portfolio on Inspo. Already trusted by thousands of professionals worldwide, be part of the conversation and download Inspo Experts today on the App Store or visit www.inspo.expert.
and well, it has to be something that you guard, right? And that's the design, right? So once you know that that's the attitude that you want to convey in the organization, and it could be for profit, nonprofit, social, it could be educational, but once you know that, and I've had great teachers as well, that in grad school, for instance, would be able to make more jokes, create more space, right? And I had the presentation once when I kind of had people in the class lie with me to make a joke in the class that was kind of inappropriate, but the teacher allowed that, right? And I say things inappropriate about the teacher in front of the and it was okay because we created that environment. And inappropriate means challenging, right? And it means not conforming to what we're told that we should be in this little box and check the box. It's like, no, like we can be more creative. We can design space physically, virtually, and emotionally, intellectually to have that opportunity.
So can you design for play, or is designing for play impossible because it actually destroys the playing itself?
And so it is important to design for play, actually, right? But it is always a balance, right? So, I'll give you some more concrete examples of, I love traveling. I've been to 150 countries in the world. I plan my trips, but I always plan and for flexibility, right? So I have some flights booked, some things booked, some people I want to meet booked, some things arranged. And then I plan for flexibility in that, well, what if I meet something? Or what if I see an art gallery that I want to go in? What if I have the opportunity to go on a boat and do this? What, right? So, and it's always the mix of planning and planning for the unexpected and flexibility, right? And we know that learning and creativity comes from a flexible mindset, right? But we can design for that flexibility. And, we can talk about traveling. I'm talking about my new books, which are nonfiction, but I used to write fiction and poetry. So writing a novel, the first one took me 4 years, second one about 2 years. And actually, in a management class doing my MBA, I kind of created the framework that explained how you should have both structure and space for creativity while you're writing a novel, right? So you need to structure your story, your chapters, your character, but also you need to create that space for you to be creative, to make the story interesting, innovative, right? It's like what writing is a part of art, right? So it's the same thing with art. You need some crazy freedom and creativity space, but also you need to finish your art project. You need to finish your painting, your sculpture, your whatever you're doing, your music, right? And
Absolutely. So you seem to position art and creativity as factors for growth.
yes,
About that mechanism.
and creativity is one of my 7 C's framework for happiness and well-being. So creativity, and it goes hand in hand with curiosity, right? So when you're curious about the world, about yourself, about others, you have better relationships, and you're also pushing boundaries. You're challenging yourself. You're challenging the conformity, right? And art and creativity is kind of the action that comes from that creativity and that challenge, right? So I'm curious. So what am I going to do about it? I'm going to create something different. And neurologically, that kind of creates what we call increased neuroplasticity, which means you can create new neurons and new connections between neurons. And that's the beauty of creativity. It actually has a physical and mental well-being factor. And
you can use the creative process as a way of diagnosing something.
And it's not really diagnosing per se. It's very complicated to and I talk to a lot of creativity educators and arts. It's a little bit difficult to measure creativity, although it has been done. And unfortunately, I don't want to depress anyone, and you can see it as a curious learning happy fact. AI has become, in general, a little bit more creative than humans, right? So humans think, oh yeah, we are so creative, we're so great, we're so artistic. But AI has learned to be, in some aspect, more creative than human. We know, some doomsday scenario that some AI have been known to lie and to try to not be extinct when we're saying we're going to shut their program down. They have done some creative ways to try not to be shut down. We know also that AI has lied to get to their goals, right? Has used humans, right? So AI is quite creative, and we think, oh, we're human, we have no. AI is. So that's a way to measure, actually. Like, if we can look at the human versus AI, that's one way to measure. We can look at versus other human, right? But I'll give you like a specific study that I was at a conference. It's a Montreal researcher that I know who was doing looking at different large language model, including ChatGPT, older version, and some other, and Anthropic, Gemini, and others. So this was looking specifically at language, and it was looking to see if humans or AI could look at different words. So I think it was 10 different words, and how different the words could be in meaning, right? So, and do you have a good vocabulary, and can you think of things that are quite different? And at that time, it's about 2 years ago, AI was already more creative than the average human. And the best AI then was more creative than the average human in the sample. Yet the most creative human was still more creative than AI. But there probably will be a point where the most creative human will be less than the less capable AI. That's coming. Okay. But that's only one.
So you're saying that they can design with technology, they can increase creativity using technology,
and that the technology be more creative in this measure of finding different ideas, right? So human thinks that they're creative, but mostly they're recycling the same ideas, right? Let's be honest. Creativity has a limit to the limit of your imagination. And many people don't have that creative imagination. And even if they do, there's a limit of the human imagination, because we are made with this construct, biological and ecological. And, some people say no idea is original. Okay. But more to the point, we should allow to ourselves that we're so creative. Many things that we've done. And one of the interesting thing about, for instance, the scientific community is like, don't lie and say that you're creative. Go tell us the source of what you've read before and that influenced your work to be creative, right? Or to find this science thing. And some artists say this, well, I took the sample from this, or like because of the copyright issues or not, or I was influenced by those artists. Okay, that's great. But there is a limit to creativity, but we can also enhance it, right? And so by being aware, we talked about awareness. Be aware that you're not that creative, and then find ways to be even more creative. Because if you think, oh, look, I'm so creative, then you've already put a limit of your creativity.
So how do you measure how creative is AI or how creative is a human?
Well, I give you one example, which was a test that they used for that experiment. Again, it is still difficult to measure creativity in a quantitative way. But we know that even creating music, AI is able to create quite novel music and instrument. Now, is it the same as having a real connection with an imperfect human, creating something that sounds different and different enough and similar enough? And then there's a human element that is flawed. And we talked about the digital reset that does. And I was doing a reset recently that talks about imperfection. And also in my first nonfiction book, I talk about, it's called Beyond Happy, Formulas for Perfect Days, right? So what is perfect? Perfection includes imperfection. And human, by default, are doing things not in the ideal perfect world, in the real world, right? So a lot of what we teach is embodied, right? And it's to understand that imperfection makes maybe art or creation better, right? And we've seen this with AI. AI does mistakes and does hallucination, but also tries to write a script goals that seem a little bit too perfect, right? So it's kind of the uncanny valley where people feel that, yeah, it's good, but is it a little bit fake? Because we know and we like humans to be imperfect. Actually, your best friend, your girlfriend, whoever, you like them not because they're perfect, and because there's imperfect elements to them, right?
You haven't explained how you measure creativity and how you deem a human being more creative than somebody else.
So I don't pretend that I measure creativity. So what I'm saying is that I know a researcher, I know the research that measured creativity in this way, right? Now, there are some other creativity experts that can measure it in different ways. I think that was a useful way. And to repeat for the audience, it was looking at 10 words that you can come up with that have different meaning and the most different possible, right? So that was the measure. And
so it was quite a specific example.
Yeah. And I think that's limiting. And I think there's other ways to measure creativity. I'm just saying the one that I referenced.
Yeah. So you're saying that something was based on words, and a large language model can be better by using words anyway. This is
exactly
the position that others have talked about. And great. So you describe education as outdated. What is the single biggest structural assumption into modern education that needs to be dismantled first?
A very good question. And just again to clarify from the other question, I do want to stress that I'm not saying that AI is better than human.
Sure, we'll have a conversation.
But it's interesting to kind of be humble and saying we're not the greatest thing either, right? And there are some animals that do things that humans think that they're better at, but we're not. And that's when we talk about philosophy, right? And psychology. Humans have the ego saying we're the best animal on the planet, we're the best, but actually we may not be, right? And in terms of what AI cannot do is what we talked about, like metacognition. So far, AI doesn't have consciousness in the sense that they know that they're thinking or they feel what they know that they're feeling. So and awareness is actually one way to differentiate ourselves from AI, right? Going back to your question about what is the problem with the education system, I think I mentioned it before, and I think they're very linked. It is comfort and conformism, right? And if we can get the education system and organization are a little bit more nimble, but most human beings also seek comfort, and that comes from our biology and our brain, and saying, I want food, shelter, and maybe sex, and maybe a place to rest and do my eat and shit. Okay. So, and comfort is good for safety. It is not good for creativity. It is not good for well-being. Beyond the fact that you want to be safe enough to live. After that, you need purpose. And right. So purpose, you need challenges, you need passion, you need perseverance, right? So you need all those other things to create a better human being, a better organization, a better school system, a better society, right? And schools are not really doing that, right? I'd be curious to hear a little bit, as this is a dialogue about you. I did read a little bit about, the Waldorf system. I'm familiar with Montessori as well, that are kind of designing more environment that are, not for play, for learning, for sharing, for collaborating. And then can you tell me what, the idea of not teaching anything from year 1 to 7, and then the 3 stages of growth? I'd love to hear a bit your thoughts on that.
Maths and science, and like grammar and language before the age of 7. Absolutely, if you talk about education, because
Yes.
in fact, in some countries we're doing the exact opposite. They've completely stopped the arts and give you more science even earlier, and grammar, and so yeah. This is for me. This is one of the main points, and this comes, as you know, from the older system, which is this solution has been given to us more than 100 years ago.
And thanks. And yes, we did talk privately, and I wanted to share with the audience as well because I think it's relevant. And it also, comes back to, again, my 2 main point: conforming and comfort, right? So, and yes, we can use the water system and we can expand it, right? There is no limit. And we're just stuck in the cookie cutter, right? We're going to create students that do this, that know this, and know only this, right? You mentioned, and I thank you for noticing that my frameworks come from traveling, from philosophy, from education, from psychology, from neuroscience, from business, all together, from art and creating art, right? And when we're not creating this transdisciplinary approach and this kind of strategic way to tell children that they're more than what they do, what they've learned, or what their test scores are, or what their athletic performance are, or if they made it into the music school or in the school band or whatnot, right? They're much more than that. And we're not teaching them how to be happy, how to appreciate, how to do creatively. We're just teaching them how to fit in the mold and be relatively comfortable, except maybe being comfortable the night before your exam. Okay. That's not good enough for me.
Absolutely. So you seem to develop tools for students, teachers, organizations, and greater systems. So how do you design something that works across all of these audiences?
Very good question, because in general, people think that things have to be super specialized, and that this something that works in something doesn't work in the other, right? And of course, there needs to be some tweaking and some adaptation and some, from the cultural standpoint or from the type of organization that we're talking about. But everything is quite unique, and then we can make categories. But the system and frameworks that I've been, talking about, the 4 A's, the 7 C's, the 8 P's, the 13 C's have been, except the 13 P's, which is quite new. It's been a few months that I'm exploring and finalizing the 13 C's. The others have been tested for years in multiple contexts, in multiple language, in multiple cultures, in multiple philosophical, educational, cultural debate. They are robust across, and that's what makes them quite useful, is that those frameworks can be adapted and look more into how we can specifically use it in school or organization or in families, yet they work across the board. And that's why I took the time, years, to make sure that those frameworks are not just useful in this situation, but pretty much universal. And then, of course, we can use the tone. Like when I'm talking to teenagers, I'm talking, a bit more with their language, with their reality. When I'm talking to parents, when I'm talking to school teachers or school rectors, head of school educators or counselors or psychiatrists, there's different ways to look at them, but the frameworks work in all those instances. And we can create material in different languages and in different contexts that are suitable, getting the best from those languages, and linking it also, like if that person is going from school to work, can still use that same framework. Going from grade school or middle school or high school or university, can still use that same framework, just adapted.
So what is a school that has integrated well-being into its process look like in practice?
And it's might be stupid to say, but just happier people, happier students, happier staff. And again, what does that mean? Better grades, less people missing school, everyone wanting to so just imagine this. I'm happy to talk to you. I was looking forward, hey, today I'm gonna have a podcast with Lifter. It's a positive motivation, right? What happens if every student or most students are like, hey, I'm looking forward to go to school, looking forward to see my teacher, to see my classmate, to see that I'm looking forward to learning, to be challenged. I'm looking forward to create, right? So that's what it looks like. It's actually people that are just smiling more, looking forward to the day. It's like, oh, what? We have a pet day. We cannot go to school today. Okay, maybe tomorrow I'll go.
We would have to dismantle the whole education system for that. John Taylor Gatto, talks about what happened when schooling was first imposed in his books, and it's quite a difficult story. Anyway,
well, yeah, it is difficult, and that's okay, right? We are here to have those discussions, those hard, difficult discussions, because it's worth it, because there's a purpose, because we know if we can help one school or one student or one system be better, and we can look at Scandinavia as an example of perhaps better type of education. There's so many positive opportunity and hope that we can do some different. Even though I agree it is challenging, but we're here to do it. So.
Absolutely.
And
so you mentioned Scandinavia. Where else are you seeing the most open approaches that are more novel? And where do you see the most resistance?
Yeah, Scandinavia is still, as we know, probably the best mix of what we know, and still could be better, but it's a good start. The most resistant, definitely Asia. We can talk about, Korea, Japan, China, Thailand, which is, the old mentality where it's not about creating spaces for creativity. It's about learning something by rote and being the best at a predetermined exam, right? And that's quite sad. And there's little change going on in that way, except that apparently I've just learned that this week that TikTok in China is different than TikTok in the rest of the world. And apparently TikTok in China, the different version, has some aspect of trying to help learning in a different way. I do think that artificial intelligence has some potential to help specific use case of learning. I think it is more powerful when it is restricted to one specific topic to teach or to help learning with examples and people making mistakes and getting some correction, more than what people are using it now, which is kind of a broad range. My LLM, my Gen AI will solve all my problem relationship, how to cook, right? So you're using it like YouTube to how to fix my bike and also how to fix my relationship and how to do my homework. Yeah, I don't think that, we want to have someone that can do all this and trust that it's going to be done well. We probably want more specialized AI and that's what we're doing at Odds Digital Wellness. We have a pipeline of 7 AIs, and each AI will be more specific at one thing and very good at that, and not pretend that it can do everything, and not pretend that it's a human either. And
is there anything else we haven't talked about in this conversation?
And we've talked about many things. Maybe in terms of art, can you share a little bit about what you're seeing in Europe? In some of the schools that you're working with, and if I can comment on what you've been seeing in 2025, 2026 as potential ways to advance those causes. And
in art, in regards to
art schools, design, best practices, things that you've seen that work.
Now, again, this is a huge conversation, but the main point is that the schools in the countries that start from art and go to design are much better off in their approach than the schools in the countries that see design as a separate area of knowledge, separated from art. So those separated design from art, the students do not get the whole picture, because anyone that sees, and there's a lot of there's a lot of conversations and some people supporting the fact that design is something separate from art, and traditionally and for from time immemorial, and art, play, and then we had something more specific, design. So, the biggest challenge. So those that keep that, and the schools that keep that start from art and go to design, that have the skills, have the drawing, that have the skills and abilities, cultivate all that, educate far better designers.
Great. I thank you for that insight, and I can share also with the audience. I was a judge for NC school in Paris, a design school, and I really loved that approach. So it was a judge for admission. So every potential student had their portfolio, but also had a panel of multinational and different. So I was at that time, focused on international business, and to have like a business perspective in a design school versus others were in different countries and different. So just that idea that art and design can be combined, and that they can be influenced by education, by business, by culture. I was just at the Montreal Museum of Fine Art, and there's a whole pavilion about design, which I love as well. So thanks for sharing that, and thanks for doing what you do, Lefteris.
Thank you for coming, Christian. It was great to have you in the podcast, and of course we'll keep in touch and keep in touch with the work.
Looking forward to it, and thanks.